never thought I'd dread Christmas at 40. When I was a kid, that holiday was everything. Cocoa mugs leaving circles on the coffee table, my mom's cinnamon rolls, my dad dressing up as Santa even though the beard looked like cotton glued to a sock. We were the kind of family people envied. Or maybe I envied the memory of it because whatever we used to be, we weren't that anymore. This year was different. This year I was bringing my daughter, Ellie. 9 years old, bright, beautiful, painfully intuitive, way too clever for her age. She'd noticed I'd been anxious for 2 days straight. "Are we going to see Grandpa?" she asked as I buckled her in the car seat, the cold wind whipping her hair around. I nodded. "Yeah, honey, Grandpa and Grandma, and Uncle Jesse." She wrinkled her nose like she was considering that lineup and not impressed with the cast. The drive through Ohio was dead brown and ugly. The highway was washed out with salt, and the trees looked like skeletons. "Do they like me?" Ellie asked, out of nowhere, her voice so small I almost missed it. I tried to smile. "Of course they do." She kept looking out the window and whispered, "It doesn't feel like it sometimes." That hurt more than it should have. My parents never approved of my life. Not when I moved out at 19, not when I had Ellie, not when I divorced my ex, not when I got my own place and handled things without asking them for anything, not even child support because God forbid my daughter ever hear that word from them. To them, I'd made bad choices. To them, Ellie was a consequence. I hated that word. When we pulled up to the house, it didn't look like Christmas. Not really. The lights were up, same old yellow bulbs that flickered since I was 10, but it felt colder somehow, like the snow was thicker in their driveway than anyone else's. My stomach tightened the second I saw my dad's truck. Some people can ruin a holiday just by existing. My dad was one of them. The front door creaked open before I knocked. My mom stood there wearing a sweater so red it looked like she'd been dipped in food coloring. "You're late," she said, but she hugged me anyway. Then she looked down at Ellie with a face that didn't quite know how to smile at children. "You're tall," she said. "I'm 9, Ellie replied, like she was reporting to a court. Inside smelled like ham and cloves and vanilla candles, but nothing smelled warm. My brother, Jesse, was in the living room, feet up, beer in hand, pretending he hadn't seen me. His girlfriend, Amanda, gave me the kind of smile you give when you're about to gossip about someone the second they leave the room. Dad didn't look up from the table until we walked in. He was carving the ham, sleeves rolled up, old wedding rings still on after 43 years. He wasn't always cruel. That's the worst part. If someone was always awful, you'd build armor. But my dad had been gentle once. He'd painted my room purple in middle school because I said purple made me feel more me. He coached my softball games. He cried when I got my acceptance letter to college. And then he became this hard, narrow, punishing version of himself. I still don't know how that transformation happened. Ellie stood quietly beside me, tugging my hand, scanning the room like she was waiting for permission to exist. "Where do I sit?" she whispered, trying to sound confident. My mom pointed. "You can sit next to Amanda." And it should have been that simple. It should have just been a seat at a table. But then Dad turned, narrow-eyed, paused for a second too long, like his brain had to buffer before remembering who Ellie was. He wiped his hands, walked over, and muttered loud enough for every damn person to hear, "That seat is for my real grandkid." Time stopped. Ellie froze. I swear I heard the chair legs scrape before anyone moved. My mom looked at her hands. Jessie stared at the ceiling like the dust was more interesting than reality. Nobody said a word until Ellie stepped backward, her face cracking. It wasn't crying, it was confusion, humiliation, and disbelief all trapped in a 9-year-old. I can sit somewhere else," she whispered. Dad waved his hand, impatient. "Just don't take that seat. Amanda's pregnant. That child will be my first real grandchild." His voice sounded proud of the cruelty, proud of the distinction he thought made sense. Ellie tried to reach for another chair, one that was half stuck under the table leg. She tugged it, struggling with the weight. And then, like it was nothing, my dad pushed her, one abrupt shove to her shoulder to help move her out of the way, but she stumbled hard. Her hand hit the floor, her hair fell over her face, and the whole room gasped, not because they cared, but because they didn't expect physical reality to follow humiliation so fast. I didn't breathe. I dropped my purse and lunged toward her. "Ellie, oh my God, are you okay?" She nodded quickly, too quickly, blinking away tears that burned more than if she'd cried. I turned my head slowly, too calmly. "You pushed her." My voice shook. Dad shrugged. She was in the way, and she knows that seat isn't for her. It was Christmas, and my child was on the floor. I felt rage rise in my throat like acid. "Get up, baby," I whispered. She stood, wiped her palms on her jeans, stared at the ground, and whispered, "Sorry, sorry for existing." Something snapped inside me right then, and Christmas wasn't Christmas anymore. The dining room felt like it shrank 3 sizes after that. You'd think someone would have intervened, maybe my mother, maybe my brother. Hell, even Amanda could have said something about pushing a kid at the damn Christmas table. But silence has always been my family's native language, just long stretches of pretending nothing happened as long as no one makes eye contact. My mom poured gravy like she was hosting a cooking show. "Ham's getting cold," she said, with her voice clipped and chipper, desperate to tape the holiday back together. Ellie sat at the far corner, the seat no one ever wanted, the one near the pantry door that always got bumped whenever someone stood up. I sat beside her, close enough that my shoulder brushed hers. She didn't touch her plate. She kept folding her napkin until it looked like origami that was slowly losing its shape. "Mom," she whispered, "can we go home?" And God, I really did. But walking out would have been surrender. It would have been letting him win, and I refused to let my father teach her that humiliation is something you just run from quietly. "Just get through dinner," I whispered, even though I felt like a traitor for saying it. She nodded, small and solemn, like she was already older than 9. Dad took his seat at the head of the table like a king presiding over peasants, fork twirling in his hand as he talked about Jesse's new job like it was the climax of the evening. Jesse sat straighter, pleased with himself, bragging about how Assistant Regional Operations Manager was technically above Associate Operations Coordinator, whatever that corporate word salad meant. Dad beamed like Jesse had just become president. Then, like clockwork, he turned to me. "So, what are you doing these days?" Same script every holiday, a question asked not out of curiosity but performance, an invitation to judgment dressed as conversation. "I'm working," I said calmly, cutting a piece of ham even though I couldn't swallow anything. He raised an eyebrow, amused in that condescending way he'd perfected years ago. "Consulting. That's what people say when they're unemployed." Ellie clenched her jaw. She opened her mouth, God bless her, but I touched her knee gently under the table. "It's fine," I whispered. Dad laughed. "I'm just saying, some people make real careers, others just drift." He gestured towards Jesse. "This guy is going places." My brother nodded, loving it. He always did. Christmas used to be about joy. Now it was about hierarchy. Then came the real theater. Amanda placed her hand over her stomach, humming dramatically like she'd won an award. "I can't wait for next Christmas. There'll be a little one here at the table." She smiled sweetly at my parents. "Your first grandchild." Ellie's fork paused mid-air. She whispered, "But I'm—" and then stopped, swallowed, and put her fork down. That silence was worse than crying. It was compliance, surrender, acceptance that she wasn't seen. My throat tightened. "Dad," I said quietly, "she is your grandchild." He didn't look at Ellie. He didn't even glance. He stared at me, stone-faced, and said, "She's not blood." The room chilled. Snow kept tapping the window, gentle and ignorant, like nature didn't care about the cruelty unfolding under warm lights and tinsel. That's when Ellie stood up. No warning, no tantrum, just stood. She held her napkin, folded into a sad little square. "Excuse me," she whispered. My mom blinked, startled. "Where are you going?" She shrugged. "Bathroom." She walked fast, hair swinging behind her, disappearing down the hallway. I pushed my chair back instinctively, but before I could follow her, Dad cleared his throat loudly, like a judge calling court. "No offense, but we didn't ask for this," he said, gesturing vaguely at the air, like this meant my daughter, my divorce, my life, everything he'd labeled as a failure. "No offense, but you brought it on yourself." It. Not her, not Ellie. It. I stared at him, blinking slowly, because sometimes shock needs a second to travel to your heart. "I brought what on myself?" I whispered. Dad leaned back, belly full of self-righteous importance. "Choices have consequences. You made your choices, now you live with them." "Choices?" I said, feeling heat under my skin. "Like having a child?" "Like having one with the wrong person," he snapped. "Like expecting us to pretend she's family." It hit me then, not just the cruelty, but the fact that It took everything in me not to throw the gravy boat at his face. The hallway was dim, lined with family photos, my childhood frozen in frames, smiling with braces and softball trophies, all before life became complicated enough for people to decide I wasn't worth loving anymore. I found Ellie in the laundry room of all places, sitting on top of the dryer, knees pulled to her chest, staring at a pile of old winter coats. She didn't cry until she saw me, then it came all at once. "Mom," she whispered, voice cracking, "am I not real?" And I swear to God, I felt my heart break clean in half. For a few seconds, I just stood there in that cramped laundry room doorway, trying to keep my composure. The smell of detergent, stale winter coats, and whatever old fabric softener my mom still used from the 90s felt out of place compared to the weight of what Ellie had just said. 9-year-olds aren't supposed to ask existential questions about being real. They're supposed to argue about screen time and dogs and school crushes, not legitimacy. I walked toward her slowly, like if I moved too fast, she might evaporate. When I reached the dryer, I put my hands gently on either side of her legs and lifted my chin until our eyes met. "Hey," I whispered, "look at me." She did, eyes glossy and wet, cheeks flushed, breathing uneven. "You are real," I said, voice steady even though my throat felt bruised. "You are mine, and that makes you real enough to move mountains if you want to." She blinked. "But Grandpa said?" I heard what Grandpa said, and he is wrong about a lot of things, about me, about you, about what makes someone family. A tear slipped off her lashes, and she wiped it with the heel of her palm, angry at herself for crying. "I thought he liked me," she whispered. I almost laughed. Dark humor, bitter humor, because kids always start with the simplest interpretation. Rejection hits them clean, without the layers adults use to excuse it. "He doesn't know you," I said, "and people who don't know you don't get to have opinions about you." She nodded, absorbing it in that way children do, slow, literal, trying to understand a world adults keep complicating. Then she asked the question that scraped bone. "Did Grandpa kick you out too?" I froze. Not everything needs to be inherited, especially trauma. I lifted her down from the dryer, set her feet on the tile. "I left," I said. "That's different." "But why did he say I'm not real family?" "Because Grandpa thinks family is only about blood. Some people never learn anything outside their own biology." Her lip trembled. "But Dad wasn't blood either." I inhaled sharply. Divorce has a way of making kids historians. They track wounds like archaeologists, piece together sequences. Your dad wasn't blood, but he loved you. That's what mattered. Family is who loves you when they don't have to. That was the closest thing to truth I could give her. She nodded, this time more settled, as if the logic of love made more sense than the logic of genetics. And then, in typical Ellie fashion, she asked, "Can we go home now?" God, I wanted to scoop her up, grab our coats, and disappear into the cold. But Christmas had always been a battlefield in my family. Leaving early was desertion. Staying was defiance. "We will," I said, "but not yet." Her shoulders dropped. Why not? Because I'm not letting him decide how our night ends. I tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear, and I'm definitely not letting you leave that table thinking you're less than. She didn't fully get it. She didn't need to. We left the laundry room, walking back down that dim hallway lined with my childhood accomplishments, certificates, soccer trophies, school portraits, all these little framed lies about happy families. And as we got closer to the dining room, the voices came back into focus. My father's laugh, my brother's boasting, my mother's smoothing of tension, Amanda's self-satisfied hum. Christmas, the season of pretending. When we stepped into the doorway, Dad noticed first. "Bathroom breakover?" he asked, raising his glass like it was comedy night. "Hope we can continue the festivities without more drama." Drama, that word, always used to discredit the person who feels anything. I took Ellie's hand. We walked to the table. No apology, no explanation, just existence. Dad eyed our hands like it offended him. "Sit her wherever," he muttered. "Just not here," I said, cutting him off, as I pulled out the chair next to him, the very seat he'd pushed her away from 15 minutes ago. Amanda blinked, Jessie choked on wine, Mom went absolutely still. Dad stared. "That's not her—" "It is now," I said. Ellie sat, straight-backed, chin high, the same stubborn confidence she'd inherited from me genetically or otherwise. Who knows? Dad's face reddened. "Don't play games at my table." "Not playing, just sitting." "You're making a scene. If this is a scene, maybe you should ask yourself why." Silence. Frosty, crackling, uncomfortable, the kind that makes cutlery hesitate. Finally, Amanda broke it, voice honey-sweet and fake. "Maybe we should open presents." Because, of course, nothing solves emotional warfare than consumerism and wrapping paper. Mom leapt at the idea. "Yes, gifts! Wonderful!" She started stacking plates like she could scrub the conflict off of them. We migrated to the living room, tree lit, fire crackling, everything perfectly curated for a family postcard no one would ever mail. Ellie sat on the carpet, cross-legged, next to the pile of presents. She waited for instructions because children are taught to wait in families like mine. Dad handed Jessie a box first, then Amanda, then Mom, then another for Jessie because apparently promotions deserve multiple gifts. Then he paused, looked at the last small box, looked at Ellie, looked past her, and said, "This one's for the baby." Amanda clapped. "Isn't that cute?" She rubbed her stomach like she was summoning applause. Ellie tried not to look disappointed. She tried hard. Kids always do. I reached behind the tree, pulled out a flat rectangular box I'd hidden there earlier, wrapped in blue paper with silver ribbon. I handed it to Ellie. "This one's for you." Dad stared like I'd broken protocol. "When did you put that there?" "Earlier," I shrugged, while everyone was busy talking about the real grandkid. The room froze again. Ellie peeled the ribbon slowly, then lifted the lid. Inside was a navy box. Inside the box was a bracelet. Gold, delicate, engraved. She traced the letters with her fingertip. She whispered them under her breath. Then she looked up at me, eyes wide. "What does chosen mean?" I smiled. "It means I picked you, on purpose." And that's the moment Dad stood up from his chair like he'd been slapped.
It wasn't dramatic the way the movies make it. It was small and mean and sharp, like the sound of a match being struck. His chair scraped the floor, a high screech that made Ellie flinch. He didn't look at the bracelet. He didn't look at me. He looked at the tree, like the pine needles had caused all this. "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" he asked, voice low enough that the Christmas music from the Bluetooth speaker almost swallowed it. I tilted my head. "It means what it says." "You're provoking me." I almost laughed. "You're the one who pushed a child over a chair." "That was an accident," he snapped. "No," I said, keeping my voice level. The words after were the point. Mom stepped forward with her hands clasped, as if prayer could break tension. "We're not doing this tonight, not on Christmas. Everyone just—" But Dad cut her off. "Chosen," he muttered again like it was poison. "That's not family." Ellie looked up at him with the kind of quiet bravery only kids or soldiers have. "But she chose me," she said. "Isn't that better?" Dad's mouth opened and closed. The baby in Amanda's stomach kicked, and she winced, suddenly very invested in the mechanics of childbirth and not in the scene happening 5 feet away. "You don't get it," Dad said, finally, pointing at me like I was evidence in a courtroom. "You ruined this family. You walked away." "I kicked you out," I said, calm on the outside, vibrating on the inside, "when I refused to marry someone you liked, when I refused to be the version of me that made you look good at church." His throat tightened. "You were 18. "Yes, and you didn't speak to me for 10 years. Not a call when Ellie was born, not a visit when I was in the hospital with a placenta abruption, not even a text when I signed divorce papers. So spare me the speech about family loyalty." Dad's face went gray, then red, then something between. Mom closed her eyes like she wished she could reopen them back in 2005 and pick a different timeline. And then it happened. Not loud, not dramatic, just truth. "You were supposed to give me a grandson, a legacy, a namesake. Instead, you gave me—" He looked toward Ellie. "This." Ellie's bottom lip trembled. It wasn't about bloodline, it was about rejection, and rejection is a language kids understand fluently. I didn't scream, I didn't break anything, I didn't demand apologies that were never coming. I walked to Ellie, knelt in front of her, and lifted her into my arms. She wrapped her arms around my neck instantly, like she'd been preparing for evacuation all night. "I'm done," I said. Amanda had the decency not to smirk. Jessie looked trapped, like someone had handed a grenade and forgotten the pin. Mom whispered, "You don't have to leave," but didn't move to stop me. That's the thing about my mother. She never stopped anything. Not when Dad kicked me out, not when he iced me out, not when he decided love was hereditary. We got our coats from the hallway, the same hooks I used in middle school before winter concerts. Ellie slipped her arms into her puffy jacket and zipped it herself. Independence learned too early. When we opened the front door, cold air rushed in, sharp and clean and indifferent. It felt better than the living room ever had. Dad's voice followed us. "If you walk out, don't come back." I turned slightly. "You said that 17 years ago." Then I shut the door. Outside, the street was quiet, just Christmas lights flickering on houses that probably had their own silent wars. Ellie took my hand. "Are we still gonna have Christmas?" "Yes," I said, "but we'll make our own." She nodded. "With pancakes?" "With pancakes." "And whipped cream?" "With too much." "And no grandpas?" "Definitely no grandpas." The drive home was quiet, the heater blowing warm air at our feet. Somewhere between the intersection near the gas station and the turn toward our street, Ellie whispered, "I'm glad you chose me." My chest tightened in a way I didn't have a name for. "Me too," I said, "every day." When we got to our house, the living room felt almost too empty, like other people's decorations make yours look lonelier. But Ellie ran to the pantry, pulled out syrup, and suddenly the emptiness became ours instead of theirs. We stacked pancakes too high, added whipped cream like snowdrifts, drizzled syrup until it made rivers, and ate sitting cross-legged on the floor with the TV fireplace crackling on mute. Halfway through her second pancake, Ellie looked up. "Mom?" "Yeah?" She took a moment. "Do you think Grandpa will ever think I'm real?" I paused, fork suspended. "Sometimes people don't know how to see what's right in front of them." She nodded. Then, "I'm glad you do." I smiled. "I always will." Later that night, after she fell asleep on the couch under the blanket that never gets folded, my phone lit up with a text from Jessie. "You did the right thing. It's about time someone did." Another from Mom 30 minutes later. "Just got home. It was a mess after you left. He's angry, but I'm proud of you." Then from Dad 2 hours later. No text at all, just silence. His favorite weapon.
When I finally turned off the TV fireplace, the house felt still and warm and ours. I kissed Ellie's forehead, carried her to bed, and realized an odd thing. The ending didn't feel final. It didn't feel wrapped. It didn't feel settled. Family stories rarely do. They keep bleeding into the next chapter whether you invite them or not. And somewhere between Christmas and New Year's, the fallout would arrive, in calls, in guilt, in apologies, in demands, in invitations, in arguments.